Peace, peace, family. Peace, peace. Peace, Sister Kashia. Or Todati Kashia. Kashia, you able to hear me clearly? Peace, Brother Mario. How you doing? Mic check 1 2 1 2. Bet. What's up, Brother Low? How you doing? Let me get this going real quick. Blessed love, Baba Cruz. Get this going. Pull up my notes. Bet. Cool. I'll give it about a minute or so, and then I'll go ahead and get started on this. Let some music play in the background.
Yeah. Hold up. Been a minute. Been a second. It's been an hour. I've been traveling hard, trying to find my power. I just caught a vibe, vibing with the dead. The feeling about all throw the away goon in my head. Yo, take my clothes, neck on fancy.
Shalom, Sister Manir. Shalom to the Nubian family. Shalom to the Nubian family. Just getting everybody some time to gather in real quick, and I'll be starting in 1 second. Peace. Shalom, Mia Precious. How's everybody moving this evening? Everybody moving strong? This is I was just talking to Brother Low prior to this. Anytime I've done like any public speaking or something like that before, I'm used to having audience feedback, so it's interesting to upgrade into this digital. I'm moving strong, Sister Kashia. I'm moving strong. Thank you kindly for asking. Cool. Right on. He said handstanding. Handstanding, Brother Cruz. Cool. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and get right into this. I don't want to take up too much of people's time this evening. First and foremost, thank you for everybody coming out, and all praise to the Sacred Society of the Illuminati and the Honorable Chief Yuya. So, the movie I wanted to do tonight was Inception. Anybody who knows me knows that this movie is like near and dear to my heart. It used to be this movie, but with the coming out of Tenet, I won't shut up about those two movies. And interestingly enough, I feel like the movie Tenet, it picks up a lot. It picks up where this movie left off. So for anybody who hasn't seen Tenet yet, highly recommend it. But yeah, Inception. For me, it's I feel like it's one of those movies I can always go back and revisit, and every time I watch it, I catch something new. I think I watched it like 4 times this weekend, just going back and taking notes and stuff like that. And Brother Maury said he never saw Inception. Oh man, that's like saying you never read the Bible. Speaking of, that's what I feel like Tenet and Inception are. I feel like Inception is like the Old Testament and Tenet is like the New Testament. But yeah, I highly recommend it if you haven't seen it, Brother Maury. So yeah, just to give people a little bit of background about the movie, Christopher Nolan is the producer. Christopher Nolan, hands down, is my favorite movie producer. He's done the Dark Knight trilogy. What's the other movie he's done? He's done The Prestige. He's done Memento. He's done Insomnia. He's done Dunkirk. I thought Dunkirk was kind of hit or miss, but yeah, he's my favorite movie director, and I always tend to find myself in his movies. Something I like to do when I'm breaking down movies is I start big and then kind of work my way in. So I like to pay attention to even, just small things like the name of the director. And I feel like, Christopher Nolan, his namesake lives up to, what he has aspired to do with his movies. Before I even get started on this, you guys are going to hear me say a whole bunch of stuff. Chief said this, Chief said that. I'm a child of his wisdom. So it's kind of like the Honorable, Minister Farrakhan and Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Anything you see Farrakhan say is coming straight from Elijah Muhammad. So anything wise y'all hear me say is coming from Chief Uyah. But moving in that direction, Christopher, his first name, Christ, it speaks for itself. And then Nolan, I believe it comes from Irish, but it means to cry. And not to cry like in a bad way, but to like proclaim, proudly. So essentially his name is proclaiming Christ. And that's something I've noticed in a lot of his movies. It tends to have to do with like the Christ energy, or it tends to have to do with salvation. The character, like in Memento, the character forgot who he was and he had to go through the journey of that. And the Prestige, he had to go through the journey of learning how to do the magic tricks and stuff like that. So that's something that you'll see in all of Christopher Nolan's movies is very heavy in the Christ energy. So starting off with this movie, a lot of people don't know that there was a predecessor for this movie that's called The Following. The Following is it's only like a 20 or 30-minute movie. And I thought it was incumbent because I feel like there, is a lot of life lessons to learn in how he put that movie together, because you've seen it span across his career. Shalom, Sister Maksha. Sister Maksha. So yeah, with the movie The Following, the character, his name is Cobb in it, and basically in the movie The Following, it's a young man who goes around and he breaks into people's boxes and he steals ideas and stuff like that. The thing that was interesting about that movie is that Christopher Nolan was still working a full-time job, I think, at the time. So the peace, Sister Sequoia, the budget that he had for that movie was, very low. Everything he did was pretty much from the ground up. And the thing that I think is really tight about that is that psychology has applied to all the movies that he's made since. So if you notice, his movies I think they're dope because they talk about mystical, what we would call metaphysical, magical type things, but they don't use a lot of side effects to get that, portrayed or anything like that. And the reason, peace, Sister Deidre, the reason that is because he started off, having to make movies on the budget. And then, I mean, if you go see Tenet, Tenet has like some crazy, wild scenes in it. And I think the thing that's tight about that is that everything that you see in Tenet, I mean, in this movie as well, is that, it was real time. Even the scene where they were crashing the airplane into the Freeport. I think I was watching a clip on it and they were looking at the most cost effective way to manage that scene. And what they ended up deciding to do was they ended up buying the airplane. And then after the movie, I think they said they sold the engine parts or something like that, and they were able to recoup the money. So I think that's a dope little life lesson. We all come from humble beginnings or whatever. And then, here he is starting with this movie called The Following, and how he's been able to take that idea and, as the Bible would say, take the faith of a mustard seed and move to a mountain. Something else I wanted to point out about the Tenet and Inception connection is Inception came out 10 years ago. What was that? July 13th, 2010. And then COVID kind of threw things out, but Tenet was supposed to come out July 31st, 2020. So there's a 10-year gap. Obviously the movie is called 10, and then 1-3 and 3-1-4. If you're familiar with 4 at all, 4 is the number for time. You got the 4 seasons, the 4 quadrants on the clock. And then a lot of people don't know this, but Greenwich, London is the center for UTC time. And the country code for London itself is 4-4. So if you're not in London and you ever have to call into, if you're ever calling from another country or whatever, you got to put the plus 44 right there. So you see that, inversion in the 10-10, and we're actually going to get to the number 10 and how it pops, and it pops up in the movie later on. So something that I wanted to point out before we start getting into like the character development and stuff like that is that Christopher Nolan really doesn't do a lot of character development for his movies. And I think that's tight because, it speaks to not developing the ego, right? His movies are straight to the point, and it's like, hey, we came to do this work and we're going to focus on this work and we're going to focus on getting this point across. Where a lot of times in other movies, you'll see like this elaborate character development and you don't really see like a point that's made in the movie or anything like that. And really that speaks to the generation where we're at. There's a lot of celebrities and famous people who are famous off their personality alone, that they haven't done they haven't done anything, they haven't done anything in the name of Yah. When I think about things now, I'm like, okay, how does that align with Yah? Like, how are you moving in that direction? And these people, they haven't done anything. They're just strictly famous off their personality alone, not their body of work. So that's something that I really enjoy about Christopher Nolan's movies, is that they're straight to the point, and it focuses more so on the message than it does the actual character development. So let's go ahead and jump right into the title of the movie itself. Inception is an act, a process, instance of beginning, a commencement. So they're letting you know right off the top that this is about a new beginning. Um, Something I want to point out before we get into this, Kabbalah is very, very integral to understand like what this movie is really, really about. Without an understanding, and it doesn't have to be deep, but without at least a really elementary understanding of Kabbalah, you might miss some of the main points in this movie. Hey, peace, Chief, y'all. So yeah, commencement, like I said, act, process, instance of beginning. The title in itself is letting you know that this is about a new beginning. Something that I've also picked up on movies is that usually that first scene in the movie lets you know right away what the whole movie is going to be about. Can't remember what book it was from, but it talks about how the first scenes tends to set the tone for the movie. Something else that I wanted to point out, if you notice, and he does this in his movies, the colors of the credit letters tend to kind of give you an idea of what the movie is going to be about as well. So for this one, I think it says syncope. It starts off in black and white. So it's letting you know that, hey, we're going to go from like a black and white way of thinking into like it's kind of like the Wizard of Oz almost. We're going to go into a primordial beginning and start off with like duality and then express ourselves into the rainbow of colors. In the movie Tenet, the two colors you see at the beginning are red and blue. And I don't want to spoil that too much, but if you see that movie, you understand the importance of red and blue in that movie. So getting back to the beginning of this movie, Cobb is laying on a beach of water. Well, before that, even they show you like the waters and the waves and stuff. The way I perceived that was like the primordial waters of noon. This is letting you know this is like a story about creation. This is like the beginning of the movie. Shortly after that, though, you see Cobb laying on the beach. And then as he's laying on the beach, he looks at his two children. So basically, this is like straight from Kabbalah. What Cobb represents right there is Kether, and then to his left is Chokmah, and then to his right is Bina. And then if you see behind the children, they have a castle. So it's basically kind of like describing the journey of consciousness before it goes down the tree of life, right? So he's looking at the children, and the children, I'll explain them as I go on in the movie, explain the significance or whatever, but it's setting the precedence, for the chief of life right there. Something I wanted to talk about Cobb's name. So his first name is Dom, and then his last name is Calm. Dom in Hebrew literally means the blood, and then Cobb is I like to pay attention to words. Something that I've learned in studying the Christ energy. It says in the beginning was the word. The Christ was the word made flesh. If you pay attention to words in movies, and the thing I love about it is that you're not locked into. And actually, let me back up for a second. It's like what Chief says. When we talk about mythology in movies, like none of it is defined. It's open to interpretation. It's what this could mean. So what I found works for me is like studying the words and breaking down the phonetic sounds and stuff like that. And then you can start to get to the root of it. So like I said, his first name is Dom, and then his last name is Cobb. So Cobb is just a merger of the word Ka and Ab. Ka in the Kemetic sciences means the spirit of, and then the Ab is the heart. And then so his name is the blood, the spirit of the heart. It's pretty much saying like the blood of Christ, and you'll see that he represents the blood of Christ in this movie. Sister Kashia, to answer your question about what the blue and represent, man, I forget the native in mythology, but they talk about the Kachina and the red and blue stars that represent the return of the Christ. So I think you and I had talked about like the difference between the Christ and the Messiah, but that movie is an excellent depiction, and I'll talk about it. I'll talk about it towards the end of this. I don't want to get too far off track. So yeah, that's Cobb's name right there. And then, like I said, the open scene is him looking down, and it goes straight into him having the dream. So the thing that's tight about that scene, and Christopher Nolan is notorious for this, is he jumps around and none of his movies are linear in terms of the storytelling. And I think the thing that's cool about that is that even though there's a linear story being told in our life, our minds tend to jump around, and we use our past to navigate. Our past is the vehicle that we use to navigate the future. So his movies jump around a lot, and they jump around to tell a linear story. But what you see is the beginning. It's him sitting down and he's talking to Sato. So it shows the beginning, or it shows the part like at the end of the movie where they're old men, and then it instantly jumps forward to like the, I guess you could call it current place right there. There's a few things that's important to note about that part is that they're in an Eastern kind of, I mean, they're like in Japan or something like that. So that's pretty much saying like the consciousness rise in the East, sets in the West. And you'll see that play out in the movie because Cobb is striving to go from pretty much this Eastern way of thinking to this Western, not Western way of thinking, but, traveling consciousness. He has to get back to Los Angeles so he can see his kids. So yeah, pretty much what you see in the first 15 minutes of the movie is Cobb trying to extract a dream from Sato. The way I equated that part of the movie was pretty much like the astral realm, where he hasn't quite fully became conscious yet, but Sato represents like the fallen aspect of his mind who's starting to pick up things. And it's kind of like, how we are with consciousness, in the sense that once we start to become consciousness, I'll use a parable from the Bible. It's like when Jesus was talking to Peter and he was telling him to get off the boat and go walk on the water. It's kind of like the same thing with this part where, and Sato tells him it's an audition to see if he's really the one who got what it takes to get this job done. So where they're sitting there at the table, Cobb he starts to explain to Sato that an idea is like a virus. And you'll continue to see this come up over the movie. He says an idea is like a virus. And he says, if I'm going to pull off this job, I need to know all aspects of your mind. I need to know everything that you're working with. So when we think about ideas being a virus, we all come with our pathologies where if we don't address that virus, it replicates within our mind, right? So something I've come up with is I call it vicarious atonement. And it's the virus of the idea of Jesus, in the sense that there's a lot of people who don't believe in Jesus anymore, but the psychology is still there, right? So, okay, even though I don't believe in Jesus Christ coming to redeem me, I might subconsciously think that Kobe Bryant died on the mountain so he could redeem my sins. I might believe that I vicariously lived through LeBron James. I might believe that Barack Obama, was my Lord and Savior, and he came to redeem me and my people. Where reality, no pun intended, we've never met any of those people, and they really have no lasting impact on our life or anything like that. Let me check out what Chief said. He said, Kaaba is also a shortened form of Yaqub. Yaqub represents the mind in the Kabbalistic mythology. Esau is the body or animal. Yaqub is the one who implants the inspired thought. All right, straight from the architect yourself. Thanks for that share, Chief. So yeah, he says, I need to know all of your thoughts. I need to get access to all of you. So it's basically like the Christ. It's like the Bible tells you, love the Lord with all your mind and your heart. And you see that happen a lot in spirituality. We talk about it, and I knew in order for you to get the most out of this experience, you need complete submission. You can't come in half towing it like, I'm just gonna sit on the back and get some information and kind of do that thing. It's like, no, if you truly want to, go through Inception, you have to submit yourself to the whole process. And something else I wanted to note about that part. So in the movies, they talk about, and this is my theory on the movie, I think that the whole movie really is just Cobb dreaming, and that all of them represent different aspects of Cobb's consciousness, right? And the thing that I caught it, and I've seen this movie so many times, was that when the security guards found Cobb, they said, hey, he only came with we only found him with this. They found him with the gun, and then they found him with his totem. And then Sato, spins his totem, which nobody is supposed to touch the totem, because if you touch the totem, then you don't know that you're no longer in the dream. So I think that was Christopher Nolan's subliminal way of kind of telling you, like, hey, Cobb, and as we go on in the movie Maul, that used to be Maul's totem as well, basically telling you that all these characters are just different aspects of his mind. The way I interpreted that, and I don't mean to be like grotesque or whatever, but when they found the gun and the totem is basically like saying, a man, at the end of the day, all I have is my balls and my word. So when you start this journey of consciousness, we come with the tools that we need. So they're going through he starts to tell him, that he needs to get access to a dream and everything like that. And then Sato starts to pick up, that somebody's in his dream. And then Cobb starts to have the issues with Maul. So if you notice, Cobb is talking to Maul or whatever. And then she sits down in a chair and Cobb is like, hey, I need you to stay right here so I can basically handle this business. That part was, I think, a shout out to the Prestige because he was tying a knot around her ankle and he gave her a kiss on the leg, which is very similar to the Prestige. But I thought it was a critical element in that part because as Cobb starts to descend down, Maul gets up. And then when she gets up and takes off, Cobb falls down. So anytime I see a chair in a movie, I always think about like a position of authority, a position of royalty. And what Cobb, as you'll learn in the movie, is Maul wasn't real. She was dead. And basically what that part signified to me was that in his throne of consciousness, he had a artificial entity. He had a memory, basically an idea. It wasn't something that was real. Cool. So yeah, during another important part that I wanted to know about that is that once Cobb goes in and then Maul starts to talk to Sato, Cobb I think he had got the envelope at that point, and then they had Arthur, and then Cobb is going back and forth with her and everything like that, and basically she's telling Sato that Cobb is basically everything they had been scheming and everything like that, and then ultimately Cobb shoots Arthur into his third eye, right? And Arthur, he represents like that linear logical aspect of my mind. And the reason he had to get shot in the third eye is like basically, I don't like saying third eye. The reason he had to get shot in the first eye is because you have to basically open up your logic to even begin to conceive. You'll notice that as his character goes on throughout the movie, he's very linear and logical. Like everything he says is always doubt. So anytime somebody brings up like, hey, we can pull off Inception or something like that, Arthur is like, nah, we can't do it. We can't do it. Or think about this, like that's not possible. And what that represents is like the conscious linear mind, where every time you start thinking about like pulling off something magical, there's always that part of you like, nah, I can't do it. I can't get it done or whatever. And something that I feel is important to notice about this movie is the appearance of the characters as the story develops, right? So Arthur is with Cobb right there at the beginning of the movie. And it's the same thing with our waking consciousness. Our waking consciousness has been there with us as long as we can remember. And, it's been planting seeds of doubt, so to speak. But, there is a healthy dose of realism that his character tends to bring to the table as well, because it forces you to look at, it forces you to ask the right question to get the job done. Something else that was critical in that scene was she said pain is nothing in the mind. And she knows that if she had killed him, it would have woke him up from the dream and he wouldn't experience pain anymore. So what she did was she shot him in the kneecap. And that's true with our life. When I think about the soul is born, like the soul is perfect. And because of that, it comes into this third incarnation or this third dimension where, we experience pain and stuff like that. And even if, you break down like the actual science behind pain, like it's just neurons and stuff like that firing off in the mind. And if you can master that, peace, sister queer. So yeah, that's what I wanted to point out about his character. And then I to speak to Chief's point about the yellow idea, I think he got shot in the kneecap because it's kind of like when Jacob, before Yaqub became Israel, it says that he wrestled with the angel, and that when he wrestled with the angel is when he got the title of Israel. So I think it's kind of similar in the sense that he was able to wrestle with the idea, and this is the start of him becoming Israel. So they get past that part, the dream starts to fall on Cobb or whatever, and then they're waking up in the second part of the dream, which there's another architect, and his name was Nash, had built. And Cobb is trying to extract all the information, and he's so deep in trying to extract the information that they have to give him a kick, right? So the way they give him a kick is they sit him on the chair, and then they push the chair off and he falls into the bathtub. The way I perceive that is, I think it's straight to the point. It's not until we realize that we're falling that we can actually begin to wake up, and you'll see that theme go throughout the course of the movie. People having to get these kicks and having to realize that they falling so that they could get back up. Yeah, right, brother Mari. Like you said, pain is a natural warning system that the body is being in or has been damaged. And that, take that right there for what it is. In the beginning of the movie, his way of thinking had become damaged, and maybe he had to go through that pain to acknowledge that. So something I thought was interesting about that part is that Cobb was trying to extract all the information, but it's like Chief always tells us, how many information whores have you seen that it doesn't change their life? They can recite all these things, but they're still the same person. And like we teach in Anu, the spirit has to be within you, it can't be on you. And I want to back up for a second because I feel like this is a critical part of the story. So pretty much the template for the story is that Cobb is a thief, and what he does is he goes around and he steals ideas from people's dreams, right? That's no different than what a lot of us did when we were within the quote unquote culture community. You just go around borrowing ideas, whether it be Hindu, whether it be Ifa, whether it be Yoruba, but never truly experiencing that Christ-like energy so that it could truly transform your life. So that's what you see happen right there. Is Cobb, he's down to the he's down to the bone trying to get that last little bit of information, and it still doesn't change his life. But in a kind of cool twist, I feel like that's an initiation into this way of thinking, quote unquote, with spirituality. It says, okay, you're dedicated to getting the information. Let me get you to the next step, and that's what Sato represented. But before I got to that part, there's a part in that scene. So they wake up for their first dream and they're in the second dream, and Sato doesn't know it's his dream yet or whatever, and Cobb is still trying to extract the information that they had went into his mind for in the first place. And they throw Sato down on the carpet, and then Sato says, "This is not my rug." I thought that was like a super, super powerful part because, like I said, when you pay attention to the phonetics, rug sounds very similar to ruach in Hebrew. In Hebrew, ruach is like the spirit, right? So it's the original spirit that the Creator breathed in the man. So Sato is basically telling him, and it's by no coincidence that the ruach or the rug is green, the heart chakra. He said, "This isn't the real deal. Like I know who I am. I know my breath of life." And he even goes so far to say that, peace, brother Antonio, peace to sister Maxine. He even goes so far to say that this is wool. My rug is wool, and this one is polyester. What does it tell you in the Bible that the Christ, yeah, hair or wool or whatever? So just like Christopher Nolan, the idea of that Christ consciousness, and basically letting you know that who's starting to become conscious as well, like they know the truth, they can start to pick up on the clues and stuff like that. And you'll see that Sato and Cobb truly do need each other, because even though Sato is somewhat conscious, he needs the spirit of Cobb to invest that energy into him to truly awaken him. I wanted to point out Sato's name. So Sato is comparable to Saturn, comparable to Satan. If you notice, Christopher Nolan's movies tend to have a character who represents this type of energy. And the new Tenet movie, it's a Satyr. But when I think about Sato, it thinks about limitations, and Saturn, and I think about boundaries, right? And these boundaries aren't necessarily a bad thing. The the limitations are what bring, and even if you wanted to, count the trillions and trillions of cells in the body, boundaries, so you can start to give form and measure to it. But there's, a healthy balance to that, right? So once you establish a number, when you don't let things to grow past it anymore, and you stay trapped, and we'll get into it, you stay trapped into that box, that linear way of thinking. Cobb represents the part to break them free from the limitations. Let me hop in the chat real quick. Peace, brother Antonio. Chief says Cobalt engineering was already linear. Nash had to go because his mind was too linear, and Sato knew that he needed an abstract mind to travel the subconscious. Exactly. And you see how they were ready to let him go. Like nobody even really gave it a thought. And again, that kind of picks up off the information thing like that. When something is truly inside of you, like you're gonna be willing to fight for it, right? But because we come across information in this day and age so easily, we can just kind of toss it and we really don't care a lot about it. And that's why you see them, willing to let him go so easy. And even if you wanted to take it from like a builder standpoint, when you build your reality based upon information alone, it can very easily come down. But when you build your reality upon knowledge, wisdom, or understanding, and the acknowledgement of sacred mathematics, that's when you start to become King Solomon. Let me go ahead and get to this next part. So yeah, like Chief said, they got rid of him. The other thing that I paid attention to was Kobo. So Kobo Engineering is really Cobb L. It's him, and I think he kind of hold up. Am I still loud and clear? You said try to refresh the page. Low, am I not coming through? If somebody could just give me a quick thumbs up real quick. Peace, peace. Can everybody hear me still? Peace, peace, family. Okay, cool. All right, thank you, Chief. Yeah. So yeah, when I was saying about Kobo Engineering, Kob El, we know that in the Hebrew, El means the Elohim. It also means those of God, and then so yeah, Kobo Engineering, Cobb El Engineering. Basically, that Cobb is working for himself, and I feel like that was another idea that, and that's why I love his movies is they build on top of each other. So Kobo Engineering was really Cobb's linear way of thinking, to speak to Chief Huya's point, and then like I said, this movie really is about a dream for Cobb to go in and redefine his whole mind. But in the movie Tenet, you get to the end of it as well, and you find out that the protagonist was working for himself, his mind. Let me go ahead and back up to this real quick. Okay, so yeah, there's another part that I want to talk about where it says they're in the helicopter, and anytime you see like in the movies, like if they're in a helicopter or an airplane or something like that, it represents an elevated state of mind. But they killed Nash, the architect, like Chief was talking about, and then Cobb was basically saying, "I don't do business like that." I feel like this is a key element part of the movie for people to truly understand. When I was watching it, it reminded me of, I think it's episode 45 on the new Chief podcast, but it's entitled "Evil versus Good," and Chief talks about how that evil is a necessary archetype. So what I saw in that scene right there was that like destruction, and Cobb represents the builder, right? So you have to have these two energies, because a lot of times when people think about evil and bad, they're trapped into Iranian dualism. So evil, bad, God, Satan, not understanding that they're really two sides of the same character. And man, I keep thinking about that movie Tenet. Tenet did such an excellent job of playing that idea out. But anyways, I'll give an example just to give it raw, right? So when you think about from the creator standpoint, and let me back up for a second. Chief talks about anything that you see in God is the best of what man can be, and then anything that you see in the devil is the lowest of what man can be as well, right? So when you think about the creator is boundless. So he thinks about everything and all potential aspects within an idea. So say like the concept of sex. When we think about sex, we strive for the God level of it. We strive for the Karma Sutra aspect of it, to reproduce Elohim on this planet, right? That's God. But on the other side of it, there's pedophilia, there's rape, there's molestation, there's homosexuality, and we will consider those are the acts of the devil. When you participate in those type of activities, they destroy itself. And you have to have the harmony between the two, because without it, we would experience everything. So you see that right there in that scene where basically Cobb is like, nah, I don't get down like that. I'm the builder. And Sato's like, that's cool. I destroy shit. And if you study, pardon my language, rather, if you study, the and like Chief also says, man, if you've seen one movie in America, you've really seen them all, in terms of that, the Saurian mythology is always going to be the template from what you see in the movies, and you're already seeing that tone being set for Osiris versus Set, or from Osiris versus Set. Let me check out these comments real quick. Yeah, exactly, brother Antonio. Like you said, just a quick gem. In order to reprogram the subconscious is, or the language of the subconscious is trauma and repetition. And like you said, if you enact those activities, repetition, that's how you can begin to reprogram the subconscious. So cool. So when they get ready to get off the helicopter, he starts asking him about Inception. And it's kind of like, I like that part because Sato kind of comes off like a salesman, right? And he's asking like the appropriate questions. If anybody's familiar with sales, question-based selling is like hands down the most effective way to do it. But he starts asking Cobb questions to get him intrigued. And then Cobb says, how complex is the idea? And Sato says, simple enough, right? So think about this when it comes to consciousness. How many people do you know that could tell you the Asiatic black man is the maker, the ruler, cream of the planet Earth, father of civilization? They can recite 120 lessons and they could tell you all this magical, mystical, miracle stuff, but their life sucks. Their life sucks. And the reason why it sucks is because life is really not that complicated. To pull from Islam, there's only 5 pillars, 5 tenets of faith that you need to be a good, you need to be a good person, right? So he's telling us a simple idea. It's not easy, but it's simple. And you know what? I honestly feel like this. I hope I don't get mercy or crucified for saying this, but I feel like this movie really is. It could be like a live action play for how to get into Anu, and I'll elaborate how it goes there. But Anu is a very, very beautiful system, and it is a deep system. But what I love about Anu is that it's simple. It does require work, but you're not going to be champion in Anu because you can spit all this deep metaphysical stuff. Is how is your character? How is your heart? How is your charity? Like Chief has taught us before, the sign of a good man is a man who's obedient to his creator. So that's pretty much that part right there. He's basically telling them like, hey, it's simple, but it's going to be hard. So, oh yeah, the other part he says is the job that he needs to do is he needs to break up his father's empire. So let me see what Chief said. He said, "True brother Chris, Sato versus Fitter, definitely Set versus the Asarian family." Exactly. So I always used to get tripped out about this part where they wanted to break up his father's empire. And with new eyes, I'm able to see it. With new eyes, I'm able to see it for what it really was. Because when I was younger, I used to think like, man, why would you want to break up your father's empire, right? But the only constant in the universe is change, and we're all growing. That's the reason why we fell in the first place, was it so we could grow and expand the mind of the creator. And if you think about it, really, if we had, and I'm going to talk about people outside of Anu, but if you have the children who are the thought seed of their fathers today creating their father's paradigm, it's like narcissism. Really, you got a bunch of what do they call them in there? A dollar broth, demiurges. You got a bunch of demiurges going in there creating fucked up realities. Because I mean, you see it played all the time. My family ate ham hocks, my family ate fried chicken, and we praise Jesus and all this and that. And what they need him to do is like, nah, we need a whole breakaway of thinking to go ahead and build another paradigm. So the other part with cobalt engineering is that it has to do with energy. Chief has taught us that energy is God, and just to give some simple physics behind it, energy can't be created or destroyed. So energy has been here just as long as God has been here, right? And the people who control the energy, they control the world. And I mean, you can go get into all the metaphysics about money, currency, and God we trust and stuff like that. So basically what this movie is telling you is that it's about the control of God. It's about the control of money. It's about the control of energy. So they get off the helicopter, and then Cobb decides that he's going to take the job and that he has to go to Paris. So I sat back and I thought about why Paris. And it's cliche, but I think it gives merit to the movie, and I'll explain as we go on. Love. Paris is known as the city of love. If you've seen the movie Interstellar, I thought it was a beautiful, beautiful illustration of talking about how love is the only thing that transcends space and time. And per the definition of Anu, love is connect. So throughout the fabric of space and time, it's love that keeps us together. It's love that connects us. So I think that that's why he had to go to Paris, because he had to go to a place of love and draw from a place of connection so he could connect this whole idea. So when he gets to Paris, he and something you've noted, I have a theory about movies. So I think that man, I love movies. Like, I can find myself time and time again in the synchronicity that I've been able to find in movies. Like, it's insane. But what I've started to notice is that a lot of times they'll use certain characters to tell certain stories, right? So the reason I bring it up here is Christopher Nolan. He's notorious for having Alfred. I forget his name in this movie, but he's in the Batman series. He's in the Prestige. He's in Tenet. He's the old white dude who always plays that kind of a Obatala type of role, like just sit back, very calm, and like he always has the energy and stuff like that. Check this out. Seda was free capitalism, while the Fishers are market dominance. Sable is global capitalism. That's why I want this simple. True indeed. True indeed. I didn't even think about that. Give thanks for that, Sheriff Chief. Give thanks for that. So yeah, he goes into the office. Michael Caine. Yeah, Michael Caine. That's his name right there. So yeah, he goes into the office of Michael Caine, and if you look behind the board, there's mathematics. There's a whole bunch of equations on the board and stuff like that. And basically, the way I interpreted that is like, hey, this is the father of civilization, Abraham, the father of mathematics. The Christ has to, the lineage of the Christ starts with Abraham, right? So he basically goes and he's telling him like, hey, I need a new builder. During the conversation, Michael Caine tells Cobb, he was like, basically come back to reality. Sending stuffed animals are not going to cut it for your kids anymore. I thought that part was like really, really deep, because it represents, think about how, I can't remember which part Chief was talking about this, but he was saying that, when we started worshiping nature, all hell broke loose. We put the gift over the giver, right? So you could even kind of equate it to when Moses came from, when they were worshiping the golden calf, and he came down from the mountaintop. What's up, brother Malik? How you doing? So yeah, basically like the Orisha, worshiping these animals, worshiping these Netaru, like that's not gonna cut it no more. Like you have to come with that Christ energy, and then also the animal sacrifices too. The other part that I liked about this was, I feel like it was that kind of like that conversation between like Lucifer and God, between Law and Lucifer, and he's basically telling him like, I refuse to submit to you. Like, and the way I understand that story is that Lucifer pretty much represents the imagination. Like Lucifer had to fall so that he could expand the kingdom of Allah, and that's basically what you're seeing playing out right there. He's telling him. He also tells him. He said that Ma won't let him create his dreams anymore. Pretty much that goes right there to like the Nevin in the story and what Chief did on the breakdown on that. Basically, Cobb has become so. He's become a human. Like he doesn't have an imagination no more. So he needs Ariadne, we'll get to the next character. He needs that Kundalini spark to re-spark his imagination so he can get going on that. So basically after that, he goes and he meets the character Ariadne. And this part in the movie is when I really suspected that like this whole movie is a dream. If you notice when she's coming down the stairwells and him and Michael Caine are going to talk to her, just pay attention to that lighting in the scene, and you'll notice it a few times throughout the movie. But what I've noticed in movies, anytime you see that type of lighting, it's letting you know like this person is having a dream kind of thing, or that kind of thing. But Ariadne, so she comes from Greek mythology, and her name essentially translates to the most holy one. But what she represents in Greek mythology is the labyrinth and the mentor, right? So she gave, I think his name was Theseus. I can't remember his full name, but she gave Theseus basically a yarn and told him, to wrap this around the labyrinth, and then, you can go in and slay the beast and then follow this yarn and you'll be able to get the way out. So she's basically, symbolic of helping Cobb get out of this dream. And then she also represents the Kundalini energy, which we'll get into in the next second. Oh yeah, so there was another part that was critical in that. So Cobb is basically trying her out basically and say, hey, I need to know that you can do this job. So he gives her like a box, and or the first, maze that she draws out is a box. So that's basically like the cell phones, the TVs, and everything like that. If you're still thinking like that, like you're boxed in, you'll never be able to think out of it. And I think Chief has said it before. There's nothing in nature that exists in a box. Everything exists in spiral, and the only way that you're able to get out of this is it spiral up, baby. So once she had figured out like the spiral, or whatever, I think he said something like, "Yeah, now we're talking." So shortly right after that, they translate, or they're in the dream world, and Ariadne doesn't know it yet. And the way Cobb brings it to attention is basically he asks, how do you know that how do you know when a dream starts? And you don't know when a dream starts. And I challenge anybody in this chat to, let me know. Remember how we got here. We can all go back and we'll say, yeah, I remember this when I was 2, 3 years old, but I don't think anybody could be, yeah, man, I remember when I was a sperm cell fighting off all those different mitochondria DNA, and then I traced it up to the mother's passage or anything like that. And it's the same thing when we have our dreams at night. We never really remember how they start. We just kind of go through it, and like he says, our subconscious feels it. So there was a few things that I wanted to point out about that. I actually was just talking to Brother Lowe before we had this before I started this, and he said like he really liked this scene. And as I was talking to him, something I thought about was that there was fruit. There was fruit all around the setting or whatever, and that was her first experience in the dream world. So this is similar to Cobb bringing her out of the Garden of Eden, like, hey, take a bite of this fruit, and see the world, see the true knowledge of good and evil or whatever. So that's what I thought that part recommended. The thing I thought was really cool about the scene is it's so, how can I describe it? So typical cliche of what everybody does when they first become conscious. They're loud, they're boisterous, they all have all these grand proclamations of like, Osar, Ihomotep, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, bro, you just started dreaming. Like, take a break. So you see that in this scene with everything blowing up and stuff like that. And then she does what the ego tends to do when it comes across spirituality. And even Chief has talked about this. Actually, this is something that is near and dear to my heart. When you talk about hip hop, it was the perfect trap for us because of how egotistical it was, rather than using hip hop to speak to the illustrious nature of Yah or Allah. What you see in hip hop and what she's doing in this scene is she starts to bend with the physics of things. She's going around, she's breaking mirrors, she's bending corners and stuff like that. And it's like, all right, that's deep and cool and everything, but it really doesn't change the paradigm of reality or anything like that. And that's what you see happen when a lot of people come first conscious. And the thing that I love about Christopher Nolan is that he always puts like a smart aleck comment at the end of his movie, or not at the end of his movie, but at the end of scenes, right? So at the end of this scene, she goes, well, if I'm dreaming, then why don't, and then, she dies and she gets hit with all this stuff or whatever. But you always hear people that, well, if you're conscious, then why do you do this? If you're conscious, then why are you eating that cheese or something like that? And it's a secular conversation. But I thought that scene was really, really tight because I think this movie is so dope because it really addresses like all the aspects of people's journey through consciousness and the things that people tend to do once they start to become conscious. So, yeah, that's what happened in that scene. Let me go ahead and pull it up. Cool. So there was another part in this scene actually that I want to make sure I cover, is that she's standing there and Kundalini. So she represents Kundalini, right? And then there's a part where they walk on the bridge and then they have these two mirrors and Cobb looks to the left and he looks to the right. The way I interpreted that was basically like once Kundalini starts to rise, he's able to look at all his past life. Like he's able to look at things with the bird's eye view. And then she shatters the mirrors, which is basically like saying, she shattered the veil of Maya from the Hindu tradition. Basically, she's shattering the dream and she's starting to wake up. Chief says they use a single handy cam in the scenes with Cobb and Ariadne, switching angles rapidly to let us know they would be casting off, disposing of projections. This was shown in that stairway scene. Oh, damn, I didn't even catch that. Indeed. And I'll have to go back and watch that to catch it in real time. So, yeah, the thing that I thought was really tight about this, so like I said, they were talking about ego and all the things that come along with that. And then at the end of it, Maul comes and she stabs Ariadne in the stomach. So basically the way I perceived that was like, if you're building from an egoic place, you're just building, or you're, bending time and space just to show how tight you are, you're always gonna die right there in the ego. And that's pretty much what it represented right there, was that, yeah, that's cool. You did all these nice, cool and things or whatever, but the ego is still gonna come and stab you in the stomach and kill you right away. So yeah, they are basically at this point in the movie, Cobb has started to recruit, and the two people he has with them is Arthur, and then he has Ariadne. And I think this is important, and I'll explain to it right there. But now that Ariadne is starting to understand like the context of the dream, they tell her the totem. They tell her that she needs to develop a totem. So throughout the movie, there's only three people's totems that they show you. They show you Cobb's totem, which, in my opinion, it looks exactly like a UFO. It's supposed to represent his third eye. And then there's Arthur's totem, which is a die and it's numbers. And the way I perceive that was that he's the logical, rational mind. So his check-in in reality is like numbers and stuff like that. Like, does that make sense? And then I'm curious to what people think about this. Ariadne's piece was a bishop on a chessboard. I know Chief was just talking about and I have to go back and read that in the Solutions for Dysfunctional Family, basically how the chessboard, he told a story within that chessboard right there. So I'm pretty sure Ariadne had a deep significance for having that bishop. I'll let people throw it in the chat if there's anything they wanted to add on with that. So the next person they get is Eames the Forger. He's a thief. He's pretty much like what's the word I want to use? He's a Legba. Like, he is in a Legba, low-key energy all day. Like, he could change characters. And if you notice in the movie, he's constantly at a place of transformation. Like, he sits right there at the heart. Like, he's right next to Cobb or whatever. The thing that I thought was funny was when him and Cobb are sitting down and they're in Mumbai, or Mombasa rather, he says, you still working with Arthur? Like, he has no imagination. So that was basically a shout out to Cobb's conscious mind. Like, damn, you still using that like logical way of thinking? Like, you can't build nothing without the imagination. Again, going back to the going back to the never ending story. So he tells him, he says, you need the simplest version of the idea. Let me check this out. Brother Mari says bishop. Her name means the holy, correct? Yeah, that's correct. Her name means the holy one. So is that, yeah, okay. That makes a lot of sense. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, sister, Sister Kashia, I would highly recommend chess. 64 places on the board, 64 codons in the DNA. The Moors came up with it. The 64 different divinations for Akim. It's a lot of wisdom to be had there. But anyways, Chief says Mal was a non-sexualized female villain dressed in 50s noir style. Ariadne played by Elliot Page. Michael Caine took care of Cobb and Mal's short and feminine role. Movie was a serious gender flip. Yeah, I thought about that, Chief. I thought about that. When I thought about this movie and I thought about it at the end, was that they said he woke up from the dream, but he didn't get his wife back. Because he didn't get his wife back, like, how dope of a world is that if your wife is still dead? And there's some things I thought about in this movie that I appreciate the philosophy of it, but there's definitely some missing parts. Sister Kashia, to speak about Mal. So, like I said, Kabbalah will give you like a better understanding of this movie. But if you look at the tree of life, at the top you have Kether, and at the bottom you have Malkuth, right? So I think that's part of the reason maybe Christopher Nolan is going for this idea that per the tree of life, you really don't see like Kether and Mal or Malkuth connected, and maybe that's why they were showing them separate. But there's definitely some gender bender psychology in this movie for sure. So Eames talks about they were talking about doing Inception, and he said it's not the complexity ideal, you just need the simplest version of the idea, right? So think about the concept of Christ and all the different religions that have spawned across from that. It's like you got Pentecostal, you've got Lutheran, you've got Catholic, just different branches and stuff like that. And it's like, you really don't need to be that complex of it. Instead of touting like what division or what branch of Christianity you are, How about you apply the teachings? And if you apply the teachings, I mean, the golden rule, love thy neighbor like thyself, just simple things like that, and the inception will begin to stick. So this is where I really feel like this movie is a rite of passage for like Anu, and just the synchronicity I cannot deny, like this taking place in my life. So they get to a guy, or he establishes that Eames is willing to do like the forgery and the tricking and everything like that, but they need to provide somebody who can get a sedative, or somebody who can navigate the dream. His name is Yusef. Just a few days ago, Chief of Yah was talking to us about the significance of his name and how it came to be, and how it was Yusef at one point. Yusef in Islam, translates to Joseph, and then from Joseph, is the dreamer. And I just thought that was like an amazing synchronicity, because I think about like what I knew is done for my life, and the dream that is helping me wake up from, and by no coincidence, Yuya, Yusef. So the part that was interesting about that was and I feel like it's important to note this part right here. So the three characters that you have is you have Ariadne, you have Arthur, and then you have Eames. And before he can go and meet Yusef, Cobb asking me, said, "Hey, was that bounty on my head dead or alive?" And he said, "I don't know. Get away and find out. And if you can make it, basically, come and holler at Yusef at the end of this." And I feel like that's what it is with Anu, in the sense that a lot of people ain't gonna make it. You know, uh, you have to, activate your Kundalini energy. You have to deal with your conscious mind, and then you have to deal with like the gateway of the heart. Like you have to be willing to write your own story, right? So there's plenty of people who come in up until this point of the movie, up until this point of Anu. They've done everything, they've got the information, they realize that we're living in a dream and everything like that. But then when they go and truly seek the person who's going to bring them from the dream, they stop. They stop. And thankfully for the people here and for the people in Anu, and I don't mean to sound elitist, but the bounty that we had on our head didn't kill us. We were able to get to Yusef, to Chief Yuya, to help us wake up from this dream. So Chief said the bishop has the ability to persuade the masses without sanctioning the royal family. It is the closest piece to the king and the queen. Ariadne went down to limbo to rescue Cobb. Indeed. Bishop Peace makes triangles on the board, moves diagonally. This is a spiritual formation. The triangle for the bishop and the piece represents the expression of emotion. Indeed. Yeah, for sure. To speak to Chief, to speak what you're saying about the triangle aspect, that's what this movie really is about. Is just, just moving with those different triangles. Like we said at the beginning of the movie, you have Kether, Chokma, and Bina, and then moving through the movie, that triangle becomes inverted. So let's see. Something I thought was really, really cool about that part is right before so basically Cobb, he takes off, he's getting ready to go through the dreamer and stuff like that. And then Kobul, quote unquote, Kobul's henchmen start chasing Cobb and everything. And then as he's chasing, is he getting away from them, there's a part where he has to go through the passage. He has to go through a very narrow passage. And the way I basically interpret that is like it says in the Bible, the path to salvation is straight and narrow, but the path to destruction is wide. So Cobb had to get through that part, and then as soon as he got through that, Sato was waiting for him at the end of that tunnel, and Sato basically told, I'm here to protect my investment. And I resonated with that part because I think everybody, in consciousness has some stories about themselves as I shouldn't be here, but there's an aspect of ourselves that's looking out for us to protect us. For those who care to take upon this endeavor, the ancestors, so to speak, they want to protect their investment. Oh, so this part was really, really interesting right here. So after they go through all this and Cobb had been talking to Eames, he said, we'll meet right back here. And then they said, for what? He said, well, nobody will ever suspect it. So this would be the best place to come back. I thought that was a shout out to Black people. Nobody suspects that consciousness will start with us. People are looking for Biden. People are looking for a vaccine and stuff like that. And you really see that in the theme of all Christopher Nolan's movies is go back to where it started. It's like the Aurea Borealis, I think. The snake biting Sankofa. The logo for Anu itself. Go back to where it started, and you'll find the answers. So get back to that. Cool. So after that part, they go back into the dream, and Arthur, who is the Lord of Mathematics in this movie, is he's showing Ariadne what's called the Penrose case, basically. And basically, in the Penrose case, you start to see things that can't happen in reality. It's like a staircase that connects itself and it goes all the way around. So he says it's how he says the reason we do it is to let us know that we're still dreaming, right? So people often, bring up sacred geometry, they break up sacred mathematics and stuff like that. But within sacred mathematics, you'll start to find things like Fibonacci sequence, you'll find pi, phi, and you'll find these never-ending numbers. And that's what he was saying right there, is that when you really start to, and like we teach in our new, supreme mathematics, when you start to getting to the mathematics, it's no doubt like we live in a dream. We live in a dream. I mean, pi, is an ongoing number that keeps going on and on and on. So I think that's what they were, striving to represent in that part. So moving along in the movie, though, they start to put together everything that they need to go in the dream. And then Sato says to Cobb, he wants to go on the mission because he wants to protect his investment, basically, right? So at that point, it goes from 5 members to team members, or from 5 team members to 6 team members. The way I saw that in my mind is like when I think of Sato, when I think of Saturn, I think of the inverted pentagram. So that's like 5, right? And then when Sato, when you work with the pentagram, though, it's to bring that energy down. It's not doing anything in terms of transformation. And then when he says we need to go ahead and do 6, that's the Star of David. That's the Merkaba. And when you have the Merkaba, that's when you can start to shift paradigms. You can, as you see, move through different parts of the dream or whatever. But as they're working through that, there's a part where Yusef shows Cobb how strong his sedative is, right? And it's like a kind of like a basement kind of thing, or I guess you could compare it to a labyrinth. And he says there's 12 people. So you see this number 12 pop up all the time. 12 zodiacs, 12 cranial nerves in the brain, 12 systems in the body, 12. Basically, like when your mind is locked into that, number of 12, you're still trapped into this cycle of time. And, still you had the black dude right there. And I thought it was cool because it made me think of Anu, in the sense that before you even begin to start the dream, or before you even begin to start self-actualization and enlightenment and transformation, like you really have to understand the power of the sedative that we've been placed under, right? And you see that where he tells him in that part, he said, yeah, the people don't come here to dream anymore. They come here to be waking up. And he says, who are we to tell them what's real and what's fake? And it's the same, in our reality. You got people who, I'll reference Chief's, Destroyer episode. Go back to the signs of the Destroyer, and it's clearly that time. But people are happily caught up in their dream. They think things are going to go back to normal after this. So I thought that part was really, really tight. So something I put down, and I don't know if it was the synchronicity in the movie or, Christopher Nolan was really to strive this, but it's the black man who's like in charge of all of this. Yusef is a black man. This movie, that part starts in Mombasa. They start to go over the names, Maurice, Browning, like these are all, black people names. This is all black people phonetics. And, sound gave birth to the universe, right? And the person who has dominion over sound has the dominion over the universe, is because through sound, we can manipulate the reality around us. So without going off too far of a tangent, actually, I'll go on this tangent. Like this movie, like Interstellar has shown, like the movie Tenet has shown, it's us who is calling the shots. So even if Christopher Nolan's intention was to make it like a small part, giving thanks to black people, we gave birth to the universe. So because it's our building blocks, you could build nothing without telling our story. Moving right along. Cool. So yeah, we talked about the energy, we talked about the currency, we talked about the god, and basically, how this is an Asarian mythology. So it's something that I wanted to point out, going back to the Ruach, to the holy breath, Yeshua the Christ. It's the sacred breath, right? And you'll see Christopher Nolan hint at that throughout this whole movie. But the part that's really, really sacred is there's a picture of so Fisher is the person's dream that they have to go to, and then his father is Maurice, right? There's a picture of damn, Chief, that's actually a good point now that I'm thinking about it. You talked about the gender bender, right? So there's a picture of Fisher sitting on his father's lap, where traditionally, it's the Heru sitting on his mother's lap. But anyways, you see him blowing into, I forget what those toys are called, but the little flowers that you used to blow into and they would spin around or whatever. It's letting you know, like, hey, the breath is what's going to deliver you from this movie. So yeah, Cobb. So yeah, they're getting ready to go into the dream and everything like that. And then he's telling everybody that he can't bring Maul in anymore because, like we said, his way of thinking, his Earth-like thinking, has completely stopped him from dreaming and stuff like that. I thought this part was really, really cool because until you really do like the transformation on who you are, like we tend to bring our traumas in. Anybody who's talked to me recently know one of my major philosophies is how you do one thing and how you do all things. Matter of fact, I'll share a funny story. I remember I watched this movie. So I used to live in Peru. And I remember when I first moved to Peru, I told myself, like, oh man, this is going to be a new beginning. Like, I'm going to get away from drugs. I'm going to get away from alcohol and everything like that. Well, something I didn't consider is that, like, Peru is one of the biggest exports of a certain narcotic. And when I went over there, I brought my whole psychology with me and I didn't change anything about me. So something you see in this movie is that anytime Cobb goes to build something, Maul always pops up. And it was literally the same thing, when I went to Peru. I still had that certain idea in my mind where I truly was striving to build something, but I was dealing with that Maul aspect of myself where anything that I was striving to build, that part of my mind was going to sabotage me until I had actually dealt with it. So when they're moving right along and they're talking about like building the dream and everything like that, to backtrack, they talk about the differences of positive emotion versus negative emotion. And the way I looked at that is like love versus hate, or the connect versus the disconnect, right? Love, like I said, I think that's the reason why they went to Paris and that part or whatever, is because love is the thing that keeps a story going over the fabric of time. When you start to break things down, and man, the way he does this, I'm thinking about Tenet again. They broke up the algorithm or whatever. When you break things up, like, it can't stand the test of time. Just simply put, it's love that is connecting force that keeps everything going. Something they had talked about basically was they saying that they were going to spend, during that part of when they're constructing the dream, they said that they were going to spend 10 years in the dream. So when I think about the number 10, I think about Dios, right? God. And like I said at the beginning of the movie, or at the beginning of this, Tenet and Inception are spaced 10 years apart. So I think that honestly, this movie picks up, where Tenet picks up where Inception left off. But they use that number 10 to let you know, like, they're talking about God. They're talking about your mind. They're talking about the oneness, the knowledge of all things that is. Chief Uyah says, Christopher Nolan is probably of Morris heritage and he knows it. By the time he did The Dark Knight, I already knew what he looked like. Those Brits connect to lineage unapologetically. Yeah, I give thanks to that, Chief. I know that makes a lot of people uncomfortable, but that's just the reality of what it is. I give thanks to our conversations that you and I have had. So, like you said, he's dropped so many things in reference to like Black people. It's kind of like Amy Winehouse with Back to Black. You start to ask yourself, like, yo, are you one of us? So anyways, when they start talking about the just constructing the dream, they talk about the kick, which I said, the important part of the kick is to realize you're falling. But then the other part is the music. And he says basically what's it called? The ears will be open so that they can hear the music across across all the dreams, all the dimensions. How is that not us? How is that not us in every single way of the world where, music is my soul. Music is what gets me up and gets me going every day. Like, music is what keeps me going. It helps me going through the dream. And like Chief says, the attack is where the strength is, right? So you see a lot of people bash on hip hop and they talk about like all the negative things that is done to the community. But if there's a negative to that, then what's the positive? If hip hop was in alignment with the tenets of Yah, imagine what hip hop could do for the minds of the masses. Maybe like in this movie, it could waken people up. So not to sound too corny with that. The song yeah, exactly, Chief. I thought that was like really, really deep. And that goes right into my next point was the song was Je ne regrette rien. I forget the name of the lady who sings it, man. But basically, saying that I have no regrets about this dream, and I have no regrets about this reality. That's the weighing of the heart. Let that heart be light as a feather. And I finally caught it. If you notice at the beginning of the movie, there's these horns that are like really really loud. It's like boom, boom, boom. If you listen to those horns, all it is the J never regret Rion. It's the horns slowed down with the lower reverb. So they use those horns. They use that song throughout the whole movie. Edith Piaf. Yep, appreciate you, Chief. Appreciate you, a million thank yous. But yeah, that song they used throughout the whole movie and like the different parts to break it up and everything like that. So I thought it was a really really tight, really really tight song. So they're getting ready to go into the dream or whatever. They've established like, hey, this is how the dream works. These are the things we need to get done. Blase, blase. Before they get to the dream, though, Sato says that they're trying to figure out how to basically get Fisher on the plane so that they can have everybody and they can do it, without interference or anything like that. First off, like I said, anytime you see somebody on a plane or anything like that, it represents like an elevated thought, a higher place in the mind. The thing that I thought was really cool and, kind of some balling that shit was that Sato bought out the whole airlines and he said, he thought it was easier. The way I interpret that part of the movie, though, is that his fallen aspect of himself, and it's really damn, it's crazy how a movie comes to you as you're talking about it, but it's really an inverse of when him and Cobb were first sitting there and they were talking, and Cobb was like, I need to know all aspects of your mind, body, and heart. So Satan being the god of materialism, he owns all the things in the material world. He was like, I bought the whole plane, I bought the whole airline. So without being too long-winded, it's basically like saying I take accountability for all of my actions. I take accountability for all of my transgressions. And I think that's an important part in somebody's psychology. It's something I've had to identify within myself. A lot of times when we start to think about like our deficits, it's like, oh man, my mom could have did this for me. My dad could have did this for me. And then, and you'll see this in the movie, we start to get trapped into those realities that aren't any real anymore. But Sato, the fallen aspect of ourselves basically was like, I take accountability for everything and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get this job done. So yeah, they get ready to go in the dream. Like I said, you see the number 12, they're in the elevator and everything like that. Yeah, so okay, yeah, before they get ready to do that, they bounce to a scene where it's Cobb and it's Ariadne, and Cobb is in the elevator, right? So like Chief said, Cobb represents like Yakub. You think about Yakub's ladder. And if you notice when they're in the elevator has, it says 12 floors, but at the basement, so that's like 13 floors. That's basically like saying Christ consciousness, the 12 levels of the mind and stuff like that. Pull out one part from it real quick. Yeah, so basically that part was really, really interesting to me because like I said, when you watch movies enough, you start to see like universes start to crash, so to speak, or you start to see like the stories start to play together or whatever. Shutter Island, when he was sitting there and he was talking to his wife and he was telling her how much he missed her. This, for anybody who's seen Shutter Island, like I don't think this movie is more like it than it is different. People Chief says, he says Sato is the Prince of Air, Ephesians 2:2. Oh shit, yeah, Prince of Air. When times past Jay walked according to the course of this world, according to the Prince of the power of the air. Yeah, I didn't even catch that. Give thanks, Chief. So yeah, you see there in Sato's domain, they're in the air right there. But yeah, highly recommend anybody who hasn't seen Shutter's Island. It's a good place to kind of pick up where this movie left off at, or see some of the same ideas. But another thing I wanted to note about that part is that this is something I'm starting to notice in my adulthood, is that I consider myself conscious, but I truly have to focus a lot of times because I find myself. It's a very fine line in the sense that our past can help us prepare for the future, but our past also keeps us locked from growing as well. So we move through life constantly referencing these places of trauma, right? So whenever we go to do something, like say for example, when I'm giving this presentation right here, I could have been nervous and I could have been like, oh, when I was in the military, all the dudes started making fun of me and they started making jokes or whatever. And then, here I am now and I'm coming in with that mindset. which speaks to the part why Sato was so important. And you see this happening throughout the movie, dreams falling apart. Like, in order for you to have inception or to give birth to the newest aspect of yourself, all of these ideas have to die. Like, all these aspects of you have to die so you can give birth to something new. So cool. So there's the other part when and this sets it up for the movie. And that part when he was in the elevator, Ariadne had snuck her way into the dream or whatever, right? And then Cobb starts to explain it, and it's cool because it really sets it up for the, like I said, the later part of the movie. But as they're coming out, Cobb says that there's only one thing that you need to know about me. And then as he goes, he really doesn't address it. He never says what the one thing he needs to know about it. He just lets the scene play out with him and Maul. At the end of the movie, though, there's almost an exact replication of that scene. And he said, there's only one thing that you need to know about me. This time, though, when he goes out and he explains, and I'll get to that part later on in the movie. But the way I equated that in my mind is like, I'm a Hebrew. I'm a Moor. Like, there's only one thing that you need to know about me. And when I first came into consciousness, I didn't have the vernacular. I didn't have the Eames. I didn't have the Ariadne. I didn't have all of my team assembled so that I could express that eloquently. But I felt it. I felt it in my soul. It's like we were talking about the other day during the Sabbath call. There's no way we can all. We don't know what all aspects of ourselves. Like, I can't tell you about the back of my head. I don't know if my hair is thinning or I got a stain on my shirt or anything like that. But we can feel it, right? So it's the same thing. At this part in the dream, like Cobb can feel it. I could feel it. I'm a Hebrew. I'm a Moor. I just haven't went deep enough into my subconscious yet to extract the information I need to truly go through that transformation. So moving right along. Cool. So there was another part right there where he was sitting down and they were in the elevator, and Ariadne had snuck in and she started talking to Maul, right? And Maul was basically trying to express to Ariadne the projection of Cobb's mind of Maul was saying that how could you understand? Like, you weren't lovers with us. You weren't down here for 50 years or anything like that. And the way I interpret Maul and Malkuth is basically like it could be any compromised feminine energy, right? So when I think about like feelings and the nature of the body, I think of material things. So we all have that thing that in our feminine nature that's been perverted. For some people it's substance abuse, some people it's food, some people it's sexual perversions, some people it's materialism or anything like that. And when we start to negotiate it with the mind, that Kundalini starts to rise. It's like, you don't get me. You don't know what it's like to be addicted to drugs. You don't know what it's like to be addicted to alcohol. Like, go ahead and get on with that. You know what I'm saying? We're meant to be lovers. And, I've dealt with that in my mind before. Like, I truly had to divorce myself and kill that aspect of my mind to break free from it. But if you sit down and talk to that energy long enough, it'll start to say things that'll like really make you question your reality. Like, maybe you are supposed to be a drug addict. Maybe you are supposed to be stuck down here. Maybe you are supposed to be a food addict. Why not? So that was what was represented in that part of the scene. So after that part, so remember I talked about the pentagram, then I talked about the Merkaba, and then Ariadne becomes the seventh person based upon what she had seen when they were in Cobb's dream. She was like, hey, like we need you in here, or I need to be in there because the other people don't know what they're dealing with. Basically, they're walking into a bad situation. So you go from the 5 to the 6 to the 7. That's like the 7 seals of revelations. At that point, it's like, all right, we got what we need to start in this dream. The thing that I thought was like so critical, and I'll equate it to Anu, is that like the first hour and 20 of this movie was really about the preparation for what they needed to do to complete the job. Once the job started going, I wouldn't say it's a seamless process, but the movie started to flow or whatever. And I think it's the same thing with our life. Like, when we all came into our new, we were all like, hey man, let's go ahead and get land, let's do this, let's do that. And we were all ready to like rush into it or whatever. But the majority of the meat and potatoes of this movie, and really, I won't say anything, but you got to get yourself right. You know what I'm saying? You have to get your Arthur, your conscious line. You have to get Ariadne, your Kundalini. You have to get Eames, which is the entry to the heart. And you have to get that ready. And then, Yusef, Chief Yuya, you have to collect all of these things before you can even begin to start the process, right? And you see that with Cobb, he has like fragmented aspects of the throughout the movie, but once he gathers all these things, that's when he can start to actually, go into the dream and get this thing on and popping. Oh, and then I put this down here. It's like Chief says, the first half we live our life is really for the world, but the second half of our lives is for ourselves. And you see that through Cobb, like I just said, basically. So, um, she said, "Truly a Sequoia in French." Give me 1 second, make sure I ain't messing nothing in the chat. Sequoia says, "I wonder if Mao is short for Yashmore, the Makub story. I'm not sure if this was already mentioned." We didn't bring that up, Sequoia. What I have perceived Mal as is Malkuth in Kabbalistic lore. Basically, she represents the bottom of the tree of life. I think it represents the kingdom, but that's something to consider. Like I also said at the beginning, like these movies, nothing is locked in the meaning. And something I found in watching movies is if you see a personal synchronicity, like listen to it. That's something that's speaking to you. So they go into the first part of the dream, right? And they get Browning to feed the idea. So Eames writes himself as Browning, and that represents his godfather. And basically what they're trying to do is they're in the dream of Fisher, which is just, Fisher, by the way, let me backtrack. So Fisher, the Fisher of men, Christ, it should be clear as day, like this movie is about Christ's energy. And even though they say they're going into different people's minds, it's all, in the mind of Cobb. They're all going into his mind or whatever, basically. So basically what they say in this part, though, is that they need Eames to dress as Browning so that Fisher can start to feed the idea to himself. I thought this was like, oh man, I thought this was so dope because it's like the Wizard of Oz story, right? When you get behind the curtain and you see the wizard, it's really not that big of an idea, but it's the ideas that we feed to ourselves that tend to be more horrendous than what actually takes place in life. So, like, you see all these numbers, 1 million people die from COVID, 2 million gonna die tomorrow, and 3 million gonna have a new strain of COVID. And me personally, like, and I can't speak for everybody, but it's the idea of COVID that does more damage to us than the actual COVID really does. I don't even know if I should be saying COVID. They might put a flag up for this, but that's basically what they were telling them right there. Is like, yo, if we could feed these ideas to black people, we don't even really have to enact the King Alpha plan. We don't even have to we don't even gotta put chips in them. You know what I'm saying? Let them get the cell phone. Let them, keep feeding ideas to themselves. So oh, so yeah, this part, yeah. So they get Browning or whatever and get Fisher to start fitting this idea of himself. So they backtrack in the movie, and Cobb is telling Ariadne about how long they were down in limbo, right? So let me go ahead and break this down real quick. There's 3 levels of the dream. It's like Elijah Muhammad taught, the triple darkness of space. If you want to go into Kabbalistic lore, like there's 3 levels before you hit Malkuth. And Cobb is basically like explaining to her the different dimensions of the dream or whatever. But then they go down to limbo. And limbo, he said, how long did they spend down there? 50 years. Nothing in movies is ever by coincidence. Like everything has its place and everything, is proper. So when you talk about 50 years, the first thing that like comes to my mind is the Sirius constellation, the 50 years that it takes to come around, the 50 years of understanding. They say, I've had some people teach me like your real age is based upon your chakra development, right? So you spend 7 years in each chakra. If you have 7 major chakras, then that would mean 49 years to master, those 7 chakras, and then the 50th year would be you on the other side of that. So he starts to talk about limbo, and he says it was nice to feel like gods, but none of it was real. And it's the same thing down here. We came down to this reality. We built pyramids. We did Angkor Wat. Like we did all these amazing things. Pretty much any natural wonder of the world. Oh, that's the deep part I forgot. Actually, I'm bright. We did all those things and we realized that none of it was real. But like Cobb told Ariadne when they were on the bridge and he had first started telling her about the dream world, he told her, he said, don't build anything, exactly from your memory, because that's how people tend to get caught in the dream. So you see this happening today. You see people talking about, oh man, we built the pyramids, we did all this and that. And man, I'm thinking about a funny video amongst the men's group that we watch, but you got some, and choose my words professionally and politically, you have people who come under comedic teachings, but it hasn't done anything for their life. And they talk about all the great things that we've done. And it's like, well, if you did that then, why can't you do it now? And it is basically because, people have become trapped in that dream. So moving right along. Oh, this isn't, man, I'm sorry, y'all. I'm just looking at some notes I've talked about. So when they woke up for the dream, Cobb was talking about how basically Ma had went and sabotaged everything that he did, right? So how different is this than when black people were brought into the Mayafa, and they're like, these people are cursed. Like, it's cool, you could do whatever you want to them, and it was the same thing with Cobb in that part, in the sense that and man, this movie is so fucking deep. You see people trying to do all these different things, but none of them will work anymore because you can't get it done until this transformation goes. You can't go until you submit to Yah. You can't go until you submit to Allah, right? So basically, everything Cobb had tried to do to this point and throughout this movie, he sabotaged because he's cursed. He lost his way. He's no longer submitting to the will of Yah. So you saw that part happen right there. So yeah, they're in the dream now. The first level of the dream. So the thing that I liked about the first level of the dream is that you see like a lot of chaos going on and everything like that. And the way I equated that was like when people first start to wake up, it's chaotic. Like you see all these crazy things, like you're focused on all the different parts of the world. You got chemtrails, you got GMOs, you got aliens, just like a whole bunch of different things that, like, how do you focus in on one different thing, right? So that's what I thought was really, really tight about the first level of the dream. And I thought like I said, this whole movie is about an illustration of consciousness and the different things that you experience at pivotal points. So, the first level of dream, the first part of waking up, you start to notice, quote unquote, all the conspiracies and stuff like that around you. So there's a part though, and actually, I want to back up, man. I'll give a shout out to Brother Panic. He actually, I went and listened, and just for reference, I believe in giving credit where credit's due. I listened to his breakdown on this a while back, so if anything sounds familiar, it's because I listened to that. But something I liked that he brought up in there was he talked about melanin. Melanin is the elixir that puts us under sleep, and he said for Black people, it's like the perfect, for melanated individuals, it's the perfect elixir, right? So it works so good that it keeps us trapped in the dream, right? But for the people who don't have melanin, they starting to catch hell. And I'm not trying to make anything crazy with that. That speaks for itself. But the reason I brought it up or whatever is that they put the gun to Fisher's head and they say, we need numbers. And Christopher Nolan, as he so eloquently does, he puts it right at the end of the scene where Fisher says, I don't know any numbers, at least consciously, but here's 6 numbers, right? So when we are fully conscious, like there's no number that can define us or anything like that. Like we encompass everything. But while we're trapped in this dream, we got the 6 numbers, the number of man, 666. So I thought that was really tight. The 2 numbers he gives them though are 528 and 491. So 528, that's 33, and then the 491, that's 14. So the 33 is the Christ, and then the 14 is Asar. Asar being dismembered into 14 pieces. So it's just a basically clever way of saying the Father and the Son. And then yeah. So this part I thought was like really, really, really tight. The concept of like something stolen from it. So I'll just read what I have right here. When you start to study like the Hebrew lineage, it was stolen from us, right? And I talked about how this, and it was cool how this little part was a shout out. basically he told him when they so he got in the car or whatever, and then Eames goes and he tries to take the wallet from him, and he says, keep the wallet, keep the money in the wallet, whatever, what's in the wallet is worth more than the money itself. So basically they were saying, like, to start this initiation off, we're going to steal you, like we're going to steal your identity, basically. um who is that happen to over here, right? And you're seeing what the people who have stolen that, how is that's benefited them and their conquest of the world. But the part that I thought was super, super ill about this was he said, keep the money, what the money is in, the wallet is worth more than the money itself. So it was basically a clever way of saying, like, yo, you can have the covenant, you can have all that stuff, you can have the namesake, but it's the culture that birthed it, that gives it the true value, the true meaning or whatever. And it's the same thing with us. Like, you can have all these things, but when you live out the culture and you take your identity back, like, that's what's more valuable than anything. But something that you start to notice in this scene, so you notice the change in the weather, you notice the change in gravity. Um they talk about how, when you see it at one level of the dream, it's coming from a higher level of the dream as well, right? So, and Chief just talked to about this before. Remember, like, say, that our grandmother who was a slave and she was laying on her back, like, man, one day, you're gonna catch yours. You gonna finally catch the curses and everything, that you reap what you sow. All the hurricanes and stuff like that we're seeing, all these quote unquote natural disasters, it's that time. It's that time, and you're seeing it happening on an interdimensional level. So Interstellar, I feel like is a really good movie to truly understand this idea, because it talks about aliens and basically how the aliens are just the future versions of ourselves having effects in this reality. And this movie is the same idea, higher dimensional beings having effect in this reality. So Chief says, nice angle, your Sequoia. Cobb said of Mao, limbo became her reality. Malkuth is feminine and the earth. Yashmel was supposed to be the better brother, as Yashmel reverses Jakub. Indeed, indeed, indeed. Cool, cool, cool. All right, so yeah, just to wrap up the first level of the dream. Oh, there's another part that I really, 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 really missed. So, what's it called? When they're going in, like the projections, and I should have talked about this earlier. When you talk about the projections or whatever, the projections are there to protect somebody's subconscious mind, right? And it does it for all of us. I don't think there's anything wrong with the projection protecting the subconscious mind, because that's what it's supposed to do. The important part is to program the subconscious mind to make sure it's protecting the right thing. So when they get into the first level of the dream, you see all the projections start to attack them and everything like that, and they are completely not prepared for it in any type of way. I think that's like when we first start to, like I said, there's chaos and everything like that at that level. But when we first start to diagnose our dysfunction, we tend to severely underestimate how bad it really is, right? So it's like, yeah, I knew I was a mama's boy, but then when you really start to pull it back, you see trains and you see water and everything like that coming out of nowhere. And yeah, like Chief said, the security protections were his ego. Um, the part that I thought was super, super ill about that was Arthur says, man, I was completely not prepared for this at all. Like, we do not have what it takes to get this job done. So like I said, Arthur represents like the logical, rational aspect of the mind, that logical mind. And it's like Eames told him in the movie, you don't have the imagination, right? So you're not going to work through this. You're not going to work through your dysfunctional by using your logical mind. Like, that's not enough to cut it or anything like that. So that's what all the projections and them attacking and everything like that. Something else I wanted to point out at this part, the first level of the dream, Sato gets shot in the heart. That's like him getting shot in the heart chakra. What you notice in this movie though is that Cobb really is powerless to do what he needs to do, like in the quote unquote waking world, and Sato has the keys that he needs to get him home. But as they go deeper, deeper in the dream, the tables, and you'll notice throughout the movie, the tables start to turn, where because of that shot that he took in the heart, his heart makes him weaker of a person, but Cobb tends to become stronger. So that's something that I wanted to point out in the movie. Cool. So that's the first level of the dream. The second level of the dream, and I'm curious to see what the people think about this, or to the Nubian family thinks about this. Something I noticed about this level was that everything had kind of like a sepia, kind of like a green hue to it, and I felt like that's like the heart, you know what I'm saying? That's the middle of the tree of life. And the middle of the tree of life is Tiferet, and it has to do with beauty. And if you notice, when he's sitting there and he's talking to the chick, is beautiful. You know, she's beautiful and like she's getting him caught in. And then Cobb comes and he's like, yeah, you know, she only gave you 6 numbers or whatever. Again, going back to that number of 6. But what we're striving to do is to get up the full tree of life. We're not, you know, trying to rest right there. And that's why the Cobb had to come and be like, hey, don't get caught up in the beauty of this world, because even as pretty as she is and everything like that, like this is still a dream and we're still on a mission and we're still working through getting through this. Um so yeah, basically Cobb, he goes through, he gets Fisher, and it's basically, so the way I thought about this movie, you know, they describe limbo as the part where supposedly that's like where you're deepest in the dream, but I felt like limbo was actually when he was closest to reality, because his idea, and it just became a more simple way of living. And I think about movies, like Chief said, whenever they tell you go right, go left. So if they telling me limbo is the dream and that's not where you want to be, take me to limbo. And I felt like, you know, at this part, Cobb is starting to wake up or whatever. But it was important, like I said, for him not to fall for Tiferet and not to fall for beauty. So at the second level of the dream, though, you notice the Arthur, Gordon LeVay, I think is his name. He can't go beyond this anymore, right? So when you think about why, it's because the next level of the dream, the third level of the dream, is like Obatala. And Arthur, like I said, he's logical. You just can't bring that aspect of you when you start to go into dreams, right? So when you even read the book of Revelations and try to explain that to somebody like in a logical, linear way. You know, 12 eyes, 7 lamps, a bloody lamp sitting on there. People be like, what the hell are you talking about? So that's part of the reason why Arthur wasn't able to go beyond in that dream. And if you notice, he had to do with like the kick, the logical. He's basically the organizing aspect of the mind of putting everything that where it needs to go. There's a fight scene in there. This really doesn't have nothing to do with like the deepness of the movie, where he's fighting with the elevator, or he's fighting with like the projections in the elevators. Um, if you go and see Tenet, and it's cool, you know, to see how Christopher Nolan built upon this, but there's a part in Tenet where a dude is basically, he's just fighting himself backwards in time. You got to see it in the movie, but when I saw the elevator scene again, it made me think about that, and it was cool to see, you know, how that idea evolved. So cool. We're in the third level of the dream. First level of the dream was when they're kidnapping Fisher. Second level of the dream is when they're telling Fisher basically, hey, you're trapped in a dream. And he says to him, and again, they're feeding all the ideas to himself. It's critical to note at this point, like, it's the same thing with us and black people, man, or just anybody really. Like, this is what news and everything like this is. If they had the power to do it, they would do it. It's not until you have to buy into the idea. You have to, you know what I'm saying, be the person who feeds it back to yourself. Because most of the stuff we see on TV, like, we are not personally dealing with. We go and create these realities for ourselves. So peace, YG Gutta. So yeah, second level, third level of the dream. So one thing you notice about the third level of the dream, it's all white, it's mountains. This is Obatala energy all day. It represents an elevated piece of the mind. Uh, they're getting busy. They're getting busy to it. At this point, though, and I feel like, man, this is such a critical point in the movie because everybody has this part, right? So when they're going into the labyrinth or whatever, like, Cobb is on the verge of becoming consciousness, right? But they are missing out on time and everything starts to fall apart. And they missed the first kick. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to at this point in the consciousness. They always have I don't want to say excuse, but they just have a different direction for their life could have went. It's like, oh yeah, man, I was this close to being a football player. I was this close to being a rapper. I was this close to being this, and that. And for whatever reason, it doesn't work out. So that's pretty much what you see portrayed in this scene right here. Like, Cobb is just on the verge of so there's a room where basically Fisher is going to go in there and he's going to talk to his father, right? But they missed the kick or whatever and everything like that. Hey, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up for a second. So because of the everything falling apart, Cobb says to Ariadne, he says, "Hey, there has to be a way we can cut through this, right, and get to the center air duct so we can get down there faster." Ariadne tells him, like, if you know it, if you know it, then Maul knows it as well. And again, this goes back to that sacred breath, like the air duct. Basically, man, I wish I could remember the passage in the Bible, but it talks about how like the people who break into heaven and hell, or who break into the kingdom of heaven and get kicked out. So Eames, who was the forger, who's the trickster energy, he was the person who created the air duct to get in there, right? But because he's the trickster, the forger, they were never going to truly find salvation that way in the first place. And it's like with doing the spiritual work, this is something that I've learned in my personal life. Like, there is no shortcuts. Like, you have to go down there and you have to do it yourself. So because of Cobb trying to take the shortcut, Maul knows what's up. And when they go down there, Maul comes into she comes in, I guess you could call it like a military labyrinth or whatever, and Cobb isn't able to kill her. And such a critical part in the movie, because like I said, like, more often than not, when we're meeting with our biggest opportunities for transformation, our biggest demon pops up right then and there. And most people can't kill it. They back out. And that's the same thing that happened with Cobb in that case, is that he couldn't kill it. But that's not a bad thing, because when you learn that lesson about yourself and you go like to the highest level, you'll always have that experience to be like, all right, I made this mistake in the past. I'm not going to do it again. Make sure I'm not missing anything right here. Yeah, so there was another part right there that was actually pretty cool. Fisher comes out of the tunnel, and then it says that for authorized personnel only. Basically, what that was communicating to the people was just letting people know that, like, when you get to that deep level of your mind, like, the only person who could do that work is you. And man, a million thank yous to Chief Yuya, man. That's why I love the beauty of Anu, is that there's no like Jesus in there. We're all here to help and support each other, but you are truly the person who has to walk through that. And I thought that was dope in terms of the synchronicity, because Yuya was driving the white van throughout the whole movie. And actually, man, I give a shout out to Chief. I'm pretty sure, I imagine if I was in Chief's position, this is what I would feel like. So there's a part where like everybody's asleep on the van or whatever, and like all the projections all the projections are shooting at him and stuff like that, and everybody's like knocked out, and Yusef is just driving. He's like dodging and weaving, and then they finally make it, and he's like, yeah, I did that. And he looks back and like everybody's asleep. And I feel like that's how Chief probably be with us sometimes. Like, Chief is so far ahead of us, knocking all these things out. And he'd be like, yo, did y'all see that? And he looked back, and we're still trying to get like Pua and the PPP and stuff like that. So I thought that was like a really cool part in the movie, and just, it speaks to the it speaks so yeah, Chiefs. It speaks to the loneliness, or I wouldn't say loneliness, but the solitude that comes with leadership. But I thought that was like a really tight part of the movie, and just the synchronicity that comes along with it. So Alex Legant, peace, Alex Legant. He says, peace, Chris. Thank you for the seed level knowledge, wisdom, understanding. Many blessings, Chief Yah, Yasad, and our new nation. I give thanks, brother Alex Legant. Anything wise you see into me, attribute to our new. So we're in the third level of the dream, and then they finally get to limbo, right? So limbo is what I would like to consider like the revelation of all secrets. Like, you start to really see why Cobb is the way that he is. And it's like going to the deepest part of the subconscious, right? So it's like Chief says, most people come to the planet with only one problem, right? One problem. And if you can figure out that problem, that'll really take care of everything else, because all the other problems that we have in our life branch off from that one problem. And you're gonna see. So this time, backtracking to what I said in the beginning of the movie, when Cobb had took Ariadne into the elevator, and he was like, "There's only one thing that you need to know about me." This scene plays out again, but this time he's conscious when he says it, right? So he goes and he sits down with Maul or whatever, and they start having this conversation. And I felt this part was so deep, it goes back to like the never ending story, that mirror, where most people aren't willing to get to that mirror because they can't deal with themselves, and they run away in terror. So at this point, Cobb is actually able to sit down and have a conversation with her, and he basically tells her like, yeah, I know you're not real anymore, like I'm not tripping off you, right? But she does what our traumas and our pathologies do to us so well. She's like, you've been stupid for so long. Like, why don't you just continue to be stupid? Like, at least you were happy when you were stupid. And man, that was that was some real shit. Like, I'll be forthcoming. Like, I've had moments, in my journey with Anu, where I've had to check myself and keep pushing. And it speaks to this in the next part, but I'll look at myself and they be like, when you were living a certain way, at least you were happy. And that's not to say I'm happy now, but there's just a level of complacency, right? But Cobb, there's a difference. And actually, man, it's funny how this stuff always pops up. So I had talked about on the Sabbath call, yeah, exactly, YG got it. Ignorance is bliss. There was a video of Chief Yuya, and he was talking to the Hebrew Israelites. And the brother asked him, he was like, do you believe in Jesus, or do you believe in the Christ? And Chief answered the question so masterfully. He said, I don't believe anything, but he said, I know the Christ is real. And for those who got the eyes to see and the ears to hear. But basically, Chief said belief is anything. Belief is for people for Thanksgiving. Belief is for people for Christmas and stuff like that. But what I know, that's powerful, right? And knowledge, that's what this, man, that's what this whole movie is really about, is knowledge. Knowledge is the one. Knowledge, in Tenet, just to go on a sidetrack about that, the whole movie Tenet was about knowledge divided. That's what he said at the beginning of the movie. So that's what this movie is about realigning yourself with knowledge, right? And knowledge always has to be the one. Knowledge always has to be at the inception, the commencement. Because if you don't have knowledge, then you become more. You become trapped at the bottom. You are moving upon things based upon feelings and vibes. And as beautiful as the feminine nature is, it's chaos. I can't build a kingdom on a water. I have to build it on solid ground. So as Cobb is striving to move to this new direction of his life, he has to build it upon knowledge or whatever. And that's basically, what he's telling Maul when he's down in limbo. He says, all this shit that you're talking about, I really don't care. I don't believe it. I'm here for knowledge. I know it's real. And he was saying that the thing that kept him trapped down there for so long was guilt, right? And that's what keeps a lot of us trapped on a personal level, is our guilt that we have towards our personal to our personal traumas, right? Like, oh, I could have did this or I could have did that. When really it's the darkness that gives birth to the light. We shouldn't feel guilty. And it's something else that's a critical element of this movie is timing, right? It's like Chief says, if we were all meant to do the same thing, then we will all be born at the same time, where we all have our timing and we come in and exactly where we're supposed to, and we leave exactly where we're supposed to. Timing, man. Time. Manage. For those who manage their time, time is everything. But yeah, so when he feels guilty about his traumas, it's like, no, that's nothing to feel guilty about. You evolved exactly when you were supposed to, exactly when the creator needed you, so you could become exactly who you were supposed to be. So basically, Cobb finally, resolves the issues that he has with Mal, and then he says, okay, I have to go find Sato, basically, right? So Sato, like I said, he represents the fallen aspect. And the movie comes full circle at this point, like I said, the Oreo Borealis, it starts where it ends. And at this point in the movie, Sato has become an old man to the point he's haggard and everything like that. And I give a million thank yous to Chief for finishing off this adage. A lot of times when we talk about spirituality, we bring up, know thyself. But the full statement is like, know thyself, old man, because the only thing getting old down here is us. And that's what that part so masterfully, displayed or whatever, was that the fallen aspect of Cobb's consciousness had gotten old or had got crusted or whatever. But it's funny because it was that fallen aspect of consciousness that was like, yo, would you rather become an old man filled with regret or, take the leap of faith? And I thought that was so cool because Cobb was willing to take the leap of faith for himself. So it gets to the end of the movie, and just a few things I wanted to drop off before we wrap up the movie. Cobb's totem is a mothership, right? It looks exactly like the mothership. Where if you look in this online and you find pictures of the first eye, uh, it looks like a UFO. Simple as that. And aliens is something that have been on my mind lately. So it's cool how this, always comes full circle. But when you think about the mothership and the mother plane, and I think I see what you were saying now, Chief, when you're talking about like these gender bender type of ideas, because it would have been nice to see like a element of healthy feminine energy to speak to this concept of the mother plane. But and actually, this is something I've been thinking about for a while. I would love clarification for this, but I think Earth, all it is just Sirius B. When you get into the ancient like African spirituality, they talk about how we're aliens who come from the constellation Sirius, right? So I think what we're experiencing on this reality is the fallen level of Sirius and Malkuth. It's the same thing, and that's what his totem represented, the mother plane. The part that a lot of people get caught up though at the end of the movie is that so the mother plane is the pineal gland, right? So he spins his totem, and people are like, oh, it's still spinning, like, is the movie going, blah blah blah. It doesn't matter, because like the commission showed us, the pineal is still a part of the brain. And what do we do with the brain when we die? We toss it out. We say, this ain't even worth it. The true consciousness, the true reality is in the seat of the heart, right? So even if I'm looking at this to like tell me something about myself, I'm still dealing with the labyrinth. I'm still dealing with the maze of the mind. And this is like a lesson that I've learned recently. Like, what do you have to say about yourself? What do you have to say about your personal reality? And to bring this thing full circle, what do you have to say about your obedience to Yah? Right? It's so many things that we look outside of ourselves. And I've been guilty of this. Like, oh, people were just talking about the great conjunction and Saturn and Jupiter and everything lined up. Like, all those it's the totem, it's the planet spinning and everything like that. Like, that's cool, but what do you have to say about who you are as a man right now? So that's that part. There was one. There's a few other ideas I want to cover before I wrap this thing up, right? So, at the beginning of the movie, the reason the relationship between Fisher and Maurice was strained was because Fisher thought the last thing his dad said to him was disappointed, right? So when they get to the part of when he finally goes into the chamber, and it's by no, so that chamber that they went to, and let me backtrack for a second. It looks like a Kaaba, right? Kaaba. And when you break down what a Kaaba is, you take a cube in 3 dimensions. And for anybody who wants to write it out, you open it up and it looks like a cross, right? And man, I've been through so much pain to get the understanding of what Pandora's box is in my life. But basically, Cobb had to go through that whole journey, and he had to open up Pandora's box for it to become the cross, for him to become the Christ. And it's by no coincidence, that room looks like a Merkaba. Anyways, though, but so at the beginning of the movie, he thought his father was disappointed in him, and then he gets to the realization that what his father really said was, I was disappointed that you tried to become me, right? So this movie, that part goes all the way back to what I was talking about in the beginning, when Michael Caine and Cobb were sitting there, and I said it's the conversation between Allah and Lucifer. Basically, like, Lucifer is supposed to go bring about something new. He's the light bringer. So it's like Obatala in this day and age telling them, I'm disappointed that you tried to become Shango. I'm disappointed that you tried to become Ogun. I designed you intentfully to go and become something new. I designed you intentfully because you're so much more bigger than that. Shango, Ogun, you're older than those energies. Like, you were supposed to become something bigger than that. And I thought that was such a brilliant part, because at the end of this, that's what we realize with all these energies, is that all of these energies are us. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're supposed to grow and evolve beyond it. So there was that part. Yeah, so that was it. Cobb went back to the east, where he started. And like I said, this isn't a SAR set ritual. Sunrise in the east, sets in the west, and I mean, you'll see that and it's an ongoing story. So once it sets in the West, then much like probably what you're about to see in these coming years is you'll see a pole reversal. The West will come to the East, and then we'll start the journey, and then go back and forth. So yeah, just to sum it up, Inception is about Cobb going through three levels of the dream and becoming the Christ and regaining the consciousness of his mind. Um, I mean, everything in modern physics speaks to the fact that we live in a dream, we live in a holographic reality, and everything like that. So that is pretty much all I have to say about this movie. I give a million thank yous. This movie has been near and dear to my heart. It's been something that has helped me understand a lot of key aspects of myself, and I always go back and I find something new. Like I said, I watched this movie like 4 times this weekend, just approaching it from different angles and everything like that. So I give a million thank yous to everybody from coming on the platform. Like I said, a million thank yous to Chief Uyah for, as my father used to say, seeing it through. Being able to see through this mud and laying the foundation to allow us to even have a platform to do something like this. The more I grow in my leadership and the things that I strive to build, there's so many things I realize I take for granted within my personal life, but just the level of consistency and effort it requires, for people to even come and be attracted to this information. So I give give thanks to Chief Uyah, and then I give thanks to my brothers and sisters in the Sacred Society of the Illuminati. Y'all in my heart. Thank y'all for helping me grow and just being vulnerable with your stories and everything like that. So before I tap into my Pisces emotions, oh, by the way, this was a Pisces movie all day. Fisher, water, Ptah, builders, and everything like that. But before I tap into my Pisces and start tearing up and everything like that, as Brother Lowe would say, I'm done. Peace and love, y'all.